Well, hello everyone, Stuckuya here. Welcome back to a little bit of a dev diary release. Now, I say release, but I didn't realize that a new dev diary actually came out yesterday. I was kind of busy working on a number of my other projects before I go to Sweden because I'm going to ParadoxCon. But quality of life improvements. I did a little bit of a cursory read through this thing, and there's a couple things in here that I really want to talk about because this is big. This is really big. This is going to completely change the meta of basically everything that you were doing with armor. And let me explain. Whenever you're going and creating a new tank, obviously you're seeing all the different stats that it has from soft attack, hard attack, etc., including the two stats that not nearly as many people understand, but I've talked about in several videos: piercing and armor. Now the thing is, if your piercing in the game as it is now is below an enemy's armor, then that means that you are only going to be doing half damage. It does not matter if your piercing is 17.4 and their armor is 17.5. That 0.1 difference means that you are only going to do half damage. So the entire meta of armor and piercing has been making a unit that is just good enough that it pierces an enemy armor, or making something so heavily armored, even though it's expensive, that you have to have a dedicated piercing unit to be able to break it. But all that is gone, or it's going to be gone. So prior to By Blood alone, the damage of divisions making attacks against an armored target would be reduced by 50% if their piercing stat was less than the armor value of the target, what I was just showing. The thresholds now described above will be in play. So if you see this right here, and I'll zoom in on it, 100% pierced, if it's greater than 100% piercing, it will do 100% damage. Okay, fine, standard, that's exactly how it was before. If it is greater than 75% but less than 100, it will do 80% damage, and if it's 50% or greater than 50% but less than 75, it's going to do 65% damage. If it is less than 50% piercing, this means it's going to do 50% damage. Not 0, not 1, not any of that. It will still, at a minimum, do half damage. Now, in a way, that means that tanks and other armor units are kind of getting, I would almost call it a debuff, because if they're going up against units that before would not have been able to pierce them at all, now they're going to be able to be partially pierced. But that is going to strongly increase the viability of different things involving infantry and other mixed units. Hell, if anything, I think this strengthens the idea of a Space Marine division where you have mixed armored infantry units. Like in the case of the Brick, which I've made earlier, and you can look up that video if you want to see it. Piercing also plays an important role now in naval combat, which we haven't forgotten about in here. In naval combat, the piercing versus armor mechanic affects the critical hit chance, simulating the penetration hits of individual naval guns against a target, and we've added the following threshold. So if it is over 200% pierced, it has a 300% bonus for critical hit chance. That's actually interesting. That means that there's now more of a reason to invest in the bigger, heavier guns versus having a bunch of cheap, light, shitty guns that you just throw up against things. That might actually give more of a reason to utilize bigger ships with bigger guns. And I'm all for these changes in mechanics and different things. It makes things more viable. It gives more reason to have a more balanced force versus just sub-spam. The ship, tank, and plane designers will now have access to an additional tool when designing equipment. The comparison window allows you to select a variant to compare against the variant you're designing. Oh! From the flags, you can see the light tanks and the other kinds of tanks and vehicles and things that are being produced by the enemy now. Is that like based off spy network? Here we're comparing the German starting heavy tank to the Panzer II light tank. You can see the comparison variant. See, I love this. I love anything in here. This is just going to make it easier to see the differences in like what you're going to be focusing on when designing something. Oh, that's going to be big for multiplayer. In short, it gives you a tool which to plan your design against to counter your opponent's equipment when you have matched the highest corresponding intelligence tier 4. Okay, this is going to give a whole new reason to actually have intelligence on an enemy. That is big. In a lot of multiplayer games, you're not allowed to do collaboration governments on people, but other forms of spy networks and other things are still allowed. That will give far more of a reason to utilize spies in multiplayer games. And now this is perhaps the thing that I'm most excited about among anything, and that is the war support and stability changes here. Okay, so I don't like this about war support and stability in the base game. It feels really weird when you are fighting against a nation. You have killed 90% of their men, right? You have taken over half of their country, and you look over at their stability, and they're still at 100% stability and 100% war support. It's like, how? How does that make sense? I can understand war support being higher, at least in the beginning with some losses because of anger, but then over time, gradually it should decrease because people are shocked by the war. War support is intended to serve as an abstraction of the population's willingness and capability to engage in the war effort. Yeah, so it's really weird that you doing things to the enemy is not really going to affect their war support. While at war, war support has a scaling negative effect on the stability of a country, simulating the dissatisfaction of the civilian population at the predicament they've been placed in. War support is now something that you need to care about during a war. All sources of ticking war support weekly have been removed. Okay, they've been changed into flat bonuses, so no longer is it going to be something to where you hit a button every so often if you need to, and your war support gradually ticks higher every week or so. You just hit a button, boom, it's there. But this, taking casualties during war, will now contribute to a gradual ticking war support malice, replacing the malice that was previously only used by abilities such as force attack. Yes! Okay, I love this, because what this means is that if you establish a strong defensive position on something, let's say that someone is on volunteer only in terms of recruitment, or I don't know, and they continuously attack you, like in the case of the AI, when you have the Soviets or some other major power, or the Chinese, etc., and they are throwing millions upon millions of manpower at you, and you've taken 100, 200, 300,000 losses, but your enemy has taken on something along the lines of like 5 or 6 million. That's ridiculous. There is no way that the public should be willingly supporting a nation that is quite literally throwing their men's lives away. So if you are continuously taking very heavy casualties, that should be something that really hurts you in your war. I just love that. That is a good thing. That should have been here from the very beginning. Now, if only that would also affect war contribution for casualties caused. I really wish. Infinite war propaganda has been removed, and this is a trivial way to increase war support in the mid to late game. Yeah, because you have a stupid amount of political power. How many times in 1943 do you have 2,000, like the full amount of political power, and there's nothing to use it on? Instead of war propaganda against countries, war support decisions now target one of 3 main malices. These decisions will offset the maximum negative trend of each of the 3 components and gradually increase it to a maximum of 0. In short, war support can no longer be arbitrarily increased outside of focuses, events, and unique decisions. It must instead be managed. As you'll note, the base generic war propaganda decision currently remains, but only may be used to increase war support if below 50%. Okay, so at least you can maintain to an almost kind of minimum level. This is a significant change we'll continue to monitor, but we're happy with the results. All right. And now armor trains and logistic strikes. I'll be honest, I've used logistic strike. Logistic strike can be very good when attacking an opponent that you have good air coverage over. It's really nice, particularly when you don't want to necessarily destroy their buildings because you plan on taking them over, so you don't want to have to repair all these damaged factories. Logistic strikes, on the other hand, just damages their logistics to the point that they can't keep their troops on the front line supplied. Doesn't matter how much they're producing, and that in turn means that you can easily wipe their units. But since the release of No Step Back, and many of you, we felt that Logistic Strike Air Mission was too strong. It kind of is. It kind of is. It's like that's the really only reason that I would build bombers. This is in part due to an oversight which we did not apply state-level AA disruption effects to it. Oh, I didn't even realize. Shit, I'm learning something in a dev diary that I didn't even know. So AA didn't affect it? Oh, that actually starts to make so much sense as to why it wasn't very hurt by anything. Correspondingly, a further issue with armored trains has been fixed, meaning they will once again be vulnerable to damage from logistic strikes. So armored trains were invincible. I never even built armored trains. I never saw a reason to make them because I was already producing such a large number of regular trains that it didn't really matter. However, to further balance this out versus the current live version, armored trains have now learned to use AA guns. So armored trains can actually defend themselves against attacks. So that actually is a reason. I like that. That's a reason. That's a good reason to build something that you otherwise weren't going to do, because armored trains are expensive. They really are. So producing something along that line that's good. We previously decided against this approach due to the relatively minor impact that armored train AA had the grander aviation, but thanks to the administrations of one of our excellent coders, we've arrived at a solution where armored trains will only inflict damage to planes actively attacking them. Okay, so it's not just going to provide a base AA bonus to whatever area they're operating in. Otherwise, you could produce a stupid amount of armored trains, and if they have 18 air attack and you have 100 armored trains that are just out spreading things about, that's a lot along a logistical front to just apply AA to. That would greatly weaken an enemy. So unless logistic strikes are specifically going after them, they're not doing anything. Now, AI tank strategy. You should now notice a somewhat more sensible use of armor divisions in the AI. Yeah, one of the things that's frustrating in Hearts of Iron is that if you look at armored units, like if you're going up against the Soviets, or that kind of thing, right? Like we just go over to the board, you'll notice that all along the entire border, they don't have groups of armor. When you go and you encircle a bunch of units, you'll trap like 12 units of infantry and a single armored battalion because their armor is spread out all along the front line in varying things, where they're acting as their own kind of individual attack unit, much in the same way as you would see what France did in World War II, and that didn't work out well against them. But the Soviets had massive armored punches that they utilized at times, like the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. There was a ridiculous amount of armor that fought in that battle. So what you're going to see is the tanks grouping up more together to specifically use punches. This doesn't translate to using tanks in the same sort of pincer encirclement that players tend to use. This is a notably non-trivial problem to solve, but it's on our wish list for... So they can try pincer maneuvers, or they're going to. They don't have it yet, but they're looking at doing pincer maneuvers here in the future. That's actually going to make the AI a little bit more difficult to contend with, because when they go and try to pincer you, you're going to have to try and counter it. You can't just focus on attack. You're also going to have to start preparing for defenses against the AI. And then allied logistics. You'll now be able to open the logistics menu for subjects and faction members through the diplomacy menu, and that gives you a better real-time view of your allies' equipment. So yes, we can actually, in multiplayer, this is big. This is really big. That means opening up your own allies' logistics and being able to see where it is that they're hurting so that you can send them over a predetermined amount. You don't need to guess, or if, say, someone is planning on betraying you in like a RP game or something, they wouldn't be able to tell you, oh yeah, no, I need 10,000 guns, but they really only need 2 because they're trying to, I don't know, drain you of equipment before they betray you or something. You'd be able to see that. You'd be able to actually look and maybe send them preemptively. That's a big buff for allies. That's a big buff for the allies. They should be able to help each other out a lot more and know what's going on. Guys, I love this. This is making me very excited for By Blood Alone, and when that thing comes out, September 27th, you bet your ass I'm going to have a video for it. Well, anyway, I need to do more of these when it comes to like Europa Universalis and also Victoria 3 over time here. I haven't even looked at any of the details for it. That's probably something I need to hop into, because I'm going to end up doing a lot of Victoria 3 and other content when that comes out. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if there are any other things that you want me to look at or kind of explain or run tests on, anything else like that. But hey, please leave your comments down in the comment section below. Like, comment, subscribe, help support this channel. And I will see you all here next time. Thanks, guys, and enjoy your time.